Hey, you guys, welcome to another day of math in sixth grade. So earlier this week, we talked about surface area, which was finding the area of the outside of a three-dimensional shape. So before that, we talked about just finding the area of any polygon or two-dimensional figure. And when we measured those things, we were looking at a flat surface. And because of that, we used square units. So here we have some examples of flat squares. So this works for flat shapes because the squares are flat and they still take up space inside the area of a two-dimensional figure. Today, we're going to be talking about volume. Now, volume is different than surface area because we are looking at the inside of a three-dimensional figure. So in order to take up space inside a three-dimensional figure, we can't use flat shapes anymore. We have to take up space, and flat shapes don't take up space inside of a three-dimensional figure. So we've got to find a way that we can take up space. Well, we can use cubes. So if we stack cubes inside of a three-dimensional figure, it will take up all of the space inside. So when we are measuring volume, we are always going to use cubic units because we're going to be using cubes to take up space inside. So here I have an example. Here we have, I don't know if you can see that, but there's a cube here, and I have just filled in the bottom layer. So I have filled it with cubes. Now, if you look at it this way, you will see that it really is just the area of the bottom layer so that I know how many cubes to fit in that bottom layer. So in this particular cube, we have 5 across the top and we have 5 across the bottom. And so the area of this whole bottom shape is going to be 25 units. Now I have used cubes because again, cubes take up space inside of the shape. So the first step in finding the volume, in fact, let's go here. The first step in finding the volume of a three-dimensional shape is we need to know the area of the base. So that bottom shape that sits on the ground, we need to figure out what kind of area we're looking at so that we know how many cubes to layer on that bottom piece. Now, once we know that, then we need to know how tall it is so that we know how many layers to repeat over and over and over again until we have the whole thing filled in. So knowing that, I'm going to show you a little more visual with that. So here I have a layer of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 cubes. So this would be a 3 by 2 or a length of 3 and a width of 2. So the area of this bottom piece of this shape is 6 cubic units. Now I'm going to fill in the rest of this with the same layer being repeated over and over again until I have created a rectangular prism. So here I have 6 cubic units. So I'll turn this around so you can kind of see it. So here we have a rectangular prism that is full of cubes. So here I have 6 cubic units. And then I have another layer of 6 cubic units and another layer of 6 cubic units and then another layer of 6 cubic units. Now we know that when we are repeating something over and over again and we're adding the same number over and over again, that's multiplication. So here's the formula to find the volume of any three-dimensional figure. When we are finding the formula, or when we're finding the volume, we are just going to find the area of the base and then repeat that answer over and over and over again, or just times it by how tall it is. So when we're dealing with a rectangular prism, the formula is just the length times the width, and then times it by the height. So believe it or not, volume is actually less steps than finding the surface area. So this formula is actually a little bit easier. You only have to times 3 numbers together. So let's look at a problem here. And I'm going to do this one with you, or I'm going to do it for you, and then we'll do some together. So if you don't have a piece of paper or something to do the work on, or you don't have a calculator, something to kind of help speed up the calculations, go ahead and pause this and go grab that now so that we can do some problems together. Okay, so I'm going to do this first one. And you can see that it's all made up of cubes, just like I mentioned before. So we have a length of 3, and we have a width of 2, so just like I showed you. So I'm going to first times those two together. So 3 times 2 is 6. And then I'm going to times that by how tall it is because it's going to be repeating itself 3 times. So I'm going to times it by 3. So 3 times 2 is 6, and 6 times 3 is 18. So this right here is 18, not just the number 18, but it is, and we don't know if these are centimeters or if they're inches. So we're just going to use U for units. And we're going to put a 3 up here because that exponent means cubed. So we are going to do, or we're going to have our final answer, 18 cubic units. All right, let's take a look at another problem. Okay, here we have another shape that is just full of cubes. So our first step is we want to know how many cubes are on that bottom layer. And so we're going to times length times width. And that, let's use another color here. Maybe something a little darker. So to find the area of how many cubes are on that bottom layer, I'm going to times 4 times 3, and that's 12. And I'm going to take that 12, and I'm going to times it by how many layers are going up the shape. So in this case, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 layers. So that 12 is being repeated 5 times. So rather than saying 12 plus 12 plus 12 plus 12 plus 12, I'm just going to times it by 5. Whoa. And make my life easier. So 12 times 5 would tell me that I'm going to have, oh my goodness, 60. Took me a second there. I'm going to have 60 cubes total. So again, the formula for finding the volume of rectangular prisms is super simple. It's just this times this times this. Length times width times height. Okay, now we're going to add a little bit more layers as we go on here. This one's a little bit easier. So I'm going to have you guys pause. I want you to try this one on your own, and then we will do it together. So go ahead and pause. Okay, let's go over this one. Okay, so my bottom layer, I have a width of 5, and I have a length of 5 and a width of 2. Okay, so let's times those together. 5 times 2. And I'm going to take that number, and I'm also going to times it by 2 because there's 2 layers of 10. So 5 times 2 is 10, and then 10 times 2 is 20. So there are 20, and here we have a unit of centimeters. It's not just centimeters, and it's not square units like it was for area. These are all cubes because cubes take up space inside of a 3-dimensional figure. So we need to make sure that we are writing it as a cubic unit. Don't forget to do that part. All right, let's have you try another one on your own. This one does not have cubes, so we just have to use the numbers. So we're just going to use the length times the width times the height. Go ahead and pause and try this one on your own. Okay, let's try this one together. So we're going to take 6 times 3 times 4. And that's all we're going to do here. So 6 times 3 is 18. And 18 times 4 is 72. 72, and not just 72, 72 cubic centimeters. Okay, go ahead. Here's a new problem. Go ahead and pause your screen, try it out, and then we will go over it. Okay, let's try red this time. All right, so again, we need to find out how many cubes are going to fit in this bottom layer, and we're going to find the area to do that. So we're going to times length times width, or 6 times 4. And then we're going to take that layer and we're going to repeat it 7 times because there are 7 units going up. So we're going to do 6 times 4 times 7. So 6 times 4 is 24, and 24 times 7 should give you an answer of 168 cubic inches. So we write inches cubed. Okay, so again, it's the best for you if you follow along and do these problems with me so that you can check yourself and make sure that you are ready and prepared to go on and then do some of the practice problems that we have for you today. All right, so let's do the next problem. This one has a little bit of bigger numbers. So if you have a calculator, that would be awesome. If not, then pause it for a little longer and you can check your multiplication and see if we can do this by hand, which I know you totally can. All right, so go ahead and push pause. All right, let's try orange for this one. Okay, so first step is I'm going to time. So here's my bottom layer. And really, it doesn't matter what order you do this in. You can do these in any order. That's called the commutative property, that we can multiply numbers in any order and it's not going to affect our answer. So I'm just going to stick with doing this bottom layer, which would be 45 times 25. So let's do it over here where we have some free space. So we have 45 times 25. And that's not something I know off the top of my head. So I'm going to multiply that together here in my calculator. And that is 1,125. Okay, now I'm going to take that number and I'm going to times it by my remaining number, which is 15. And you should get an answer of 16,875. That one was definitely bigger than what we have been doing. And that is again in cubic. Wow, that was ugly. Cubic centimeters. Okay, so check your work. If you didn't get it right, maybe go back and try it again and see what you did wrong. All right, let's move on to the next problem. Now, moving on, I want you to be aware that you're going to see some problems today that have fractions. Don't be afraid of fractions because all this means, so this particular problem right here that you see on your screen, all that means is that I might have 3 by 3. Let's see if I can make this. Okay, so here I have 3 by 3. So I'm going to actually just multiply the numbers together that don't have the fraction because I want you to understand what this means. So I have a 3 by 3 cubic layer, and I'm going to make this 5 whole times. That's what this 5 right here represents, is that I'm making 5 full layers of 9 cubes. And then this last layer is not a full layer. It's a fractional layer. So that means that it's going to use a fourth of the amount of cubes that I have. So what is a fourth of this? Well, all we need to do is do the same formula. Don't change anything. But we're just going to have to remember and go back in our minds and figure out how we're going to multiply by a mixed number or by a fraction. So let's do this one together, and then I'll have you try some on your own. Okay, so again, I'm going to multiply the whole numbers together first because it doesn't matter what order we do this in. All that means is that this rectangle would just be flipped up. So it would just be rotated this way. And then 3 by 3 would be my base. So it doesn't matter. I can flip it around anyway, and it's going to be the same. So I'm going to times 3 by 3 together first. And that equals 9. So that means, again, I have 9 cubes that are on that layer. And then I'm going to repeat that layer 5 whole times and then a fourth of a time. So that's what that fraction means. But really, all we need to do is just remember what we do when we're multiplying by a mixed number. And anytime we're multiplying by a mixed number, you have to change it back into an improper fraction. So to do that, remember this backwards C or whatever method you use. We're going to multiply our denominator by the whole number. And that is, I'm going to put a little multiplication sign here. That's 20 plus, I'm going to add my numerator. That doesn't really help you because that's so messy, whatever. So 4 times 5 is 20 plus 1 is 21 fourths. So I'm going to put this over 1 and I'm going to times 9 over 1 by 21 fourths. And then that's going to tell me how many cubic units I have. Now I can't cross simplify because they don't have anything in common. So I'm just going to bust out my calculator and I'm going to times 9 times 21, and that is 189. And then I'm going to multiply my denominators, which is 4. And then I'm going to change this back. Don't mind how ugly that is. I'm going to change that back into a mixed number. We never, ever leave a fraction in improper form. That's not simplified. We want to always change it back into a mixed number. So I'm going to ask myself, how many groups of 4 fit into 89? Or really, we're just dividing 189 divided by 4. And it goes in 47 times. So that means we have 47 cubes in those layers, and then we have a fractional piece left over. So if I have 47 layers of 9, or sorry, 47 cubes, not 47 layers of 9. So 4 times 47 is 188, and we have 1 left over, so we have 1/4. Okay, now that was a lot of review. We probably haven't thought about fractions for a long time. So let me just go back and review those steps one more time. So when we are multiplying by a fraction or a mixed number, we want to change it to an improper fraction first. So 5 and 1/4 is actually 21/4. We multiply and then we multiply and then we change it back into a mixed number. And this is how many cubic units fit into that whole cube. So we have 47 and 1/4. So 47 cubes and then 1/4. Okay, so let's move on. I'm going to have you guys try this next one on your own. Okay. Oh, it left. Okay. So here we have a layer of 5 times 4. If we flip this around, I would always recommend, if you have 2 whole numbers, to just multiply those first, and then you're not multiplying by fractions 2 times. So go ahead and multiply your whole numbers, and then take that whole number and multiply it by your mixed number and see what you get. Go ahead and push pause and try it on your own now. Okay, let's try it out. So this layer right here, 5 times 4, remember our formula does not change. It is still going to be length times width times height. All we're doing is just multiplying these 3 numbers together. Always, that is how you find the volume of any rectangular prism or cube. It's just length times width times height. This one just adds an extra layer because we have fractional pieces now. So all we're going to be doing is just timesing by a fraction, and you can do it. Fractions are not scary. You can do it. So let's do 5 times 4, and that gives me 20. And I'm going to take that 20, and I'm going to times it by the improper fraction of 6 and 1/3. So I times 3 times 6, which is 18, plus 1 is 19. 19/3. Okay, so again, we're going to have some big numbers here because we can't cross simplify, but we can do that. So 20 times 19 gives me 380. We're going to go off the screen here a little bit. That's okay. Okay, so 380. And then I multiply my denominators, which is 1 times 3, which is 3. And then I'm going to divide these to give me my mixed number. So I want to know how many groups of 3 fit into 380. Well, let's take 380, divide it by 3, and I get 126 whole groups. So that's how many cubic units there are, or how many whole cubic units there are. And now I'm going to figure out the fractional piece. Okay, so I take 126, times it by 3. We have 178, which gives us 2 left over. That's an ugly 2, but again, you're going to forgive how ugly I'm writing with a mouse pad. So our total answer is 126 and 2/3. So that's how many cubic units will fit into this entire rectangular prism. All right. Let's see. Okay. That is all the problems that we have for today. Go ahead and again reach out if you have any questions. If you log into your iReady, or if you log into whatever your teacher has put up for you, you will have some extra practice problems today. So go ahead and try them out. Don't be afraid, and it's okay if we get wrong answers. It's okay, but it's just try. Just put yourself out there and try some problems. Remember, this is very straightforward. Don't forget, just length times width times height. And sometimes we might see some fractions, and it's okay. Don't be afraid of fractions. They're going to pop up, and you can do it. I know you can. I believe in you. So go ahead and try it out. Good luck, and let us know how we can help you.